The lie came out so smoothly I almost believed I'd been practicing it for years. "She's my wife," I told the waitress. Across the booth, Maren Cole froze with a lemon wedge halfway to her iced tea. The waitress smiled, pen hovering over her pad. "That's sweet. How long have you two been married?" I should have laughed. I should have said, "Sorry, bad joke. She's my best friend, and I'm apparently having a nervous breakdown over pancakes." Instead, Maren lowered the lemon into her glass, leaned across the table until her knee brushed mine beneath the booth, and whispered, "Don't you dare take it back." That was the moment my life split into before and after. My name is Nolan Reed. I was 29 years old, worked as a project manager for a small construction firm in Portland, and had spent most of my adult life being the reliable guy women described as safe right before they went home with someone less safe. Maren had been my best friend since junior year of college when she found me locked out of my dorm room wearing shower shoes and a towel, and instead of laughing, handed me her oversized sweatshirt and said, "Congratulations, you're now my charity case." She was 28 now, a graphic designer with dark auburn hair. She cut herself whenever she was stressed, green eyes that noticed everything, and a laugh that made strangers turn their heads, like somebody had opened a window in a stuffy room. For 7 years, I told myself loving her didn't count if I never said it out loud. That morning, we were at Daisy's Diner off Hawthorne, sitting in our usual corner booth with the cracked red vinyl seat and the crooked painting of Mount Hood above us. It was raining in that sideways Portland way that made everyone look disappointed in the sky. Maren wore my old denim jacket over a yellow sundress because she had shown up at my apartment 15 minutes earlier and said, "Emergency brunch." When Maren said emergency, it could mean anything from actual emotional collapse to she'd run out of oat milk. This time, it meant her cousin's engagement brunch was happening in 2 hours. Her mother had texted 17 times, and apparently her entire family thought it was sad that she was still single. "I'm not single," she'd said when she came in, dripping rain onto my doormat. I looked around my apartment. "Are we expecting someone?" She pointed at me. "Don't be dense before coffee." And that was how we ended up at Daisy's, where Maren was explaining that she needed me to attend the brunch as her romantic buffer, which was a phrase she said with complete seriousness while stealing half my hash browns. "I thought I was your emotional support raccoon," I said. "You can be both. You contain multitudes." "Maren, what? You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend at a family brunch?" She stirred her tea too fast. Ice clicked against glass. "Only for 2 hours." I watched her avoid my eyes. That was new. Maren could stare down rude clients, parking enforcement, and men who said "smile" on sidewalks. But right then she was studying the paper napkin like it had classified information printed on it. "What did your mother say?" I asked. Her mouth tightened. There it was. She said maybe if I stopped being so picky, I wouldn't have to show up alone again. Maren gave a little laugh that had no humor in it. Then she suggested I call Brent. Brent was her ex. He wore linen in winter, corrected waiters, and once told Maren her laugh was a little much in public. I had hated him with the calm, focused energy of a man assembling furniture without instructions. "Brent is shaped like an apology nobody accepted," I said. Maren blinked, then laughed for real. And there it was. The thing I lived on more than I should have. Her face changing because of something I said. Her foot nudging mine under the table. The quick warmth in her eyes before she looked away. The waitress came over before I could say anything else. She was young, cheerful, maybe new. Her name tag said Kelsey, and she had the bright, dangerous energy of someone who loved strangers' personal lives. "You two are adorable," she said, topping off my coffee. "I've been watching you argue over potatoes for 10 minutes. Maren smiled. "I started it." I defended the potatoes. Kelsey glanced between us. "First date?" Maren opened her mouth. And I panicked. Not because pretending to be her boyfriend scared me. Because for one stupid second I wanted something bigger than boyfriend. I wanted the life people assumed we already had when they saw us in a booth sharing breakfast and timing each other's jokes without trying. So I said it. "She's my wife." The diner noise seemed to dip around us. Maren's eyes snapped to mine wide and unreadable. I felt heat climb up my neck. "I mean, That was when her knee pressed against mine. Not accidentally, not politely, deliberately. She leaned closer, her voice barely there. Don't you dare take it back. My heart did something embarrassing in my chest. Kelsey clutched the coffee pot like I'd just proposed in front of her. Oh my gosh, I knew it. You have married energy. Maren looked at me, one eyebrow lifting. Married energy. If I survived this breakfast, those words were going to haunt me. 3 years, Maren said suddenly. I stared at her. She turned to Kelsey with a calm little smile. We've been married 3 years. Kelsey sighed. That is so cute. You still flirt like newlyweds. Maren's smile sharpened. He's very committed to keeping the spark alive. I coughed into my coffee. Kelsey laughed and walked away, leaving us alone with 2 plates, one enormous lie, and the most dangerous silence I'd ever sat in. Maren reached for my fork and took another bite of my hash browns. You're handling this well, I said. You called me your wife in a diner, Nolan. It slipped. Wife is not a slip. Wife is a legal category. I was under pressure. From a waitress asking if this was a first date? She had a pen. Maren tried not to smile, failed, then looked down. Her fingers rested near mine on the table, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her without touching her. For years we had operated inside an invisible boundary. Hugs were allowed. Shoulder bumps were safe. Falling asleep on the same couch during movie night was fine as long as we both pretended we woke up surprised. But this felt different. This felt like the boundary had leaned forward and asked if we were brave enough to cross it. Why didn't you want me to take it back? I asked. Her smile faded. Outside, rain slid down the window in silver lines. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee, butter, and everything I was afraid to lose. Maren turned her glass slowly between both hands. Because for once I didn't want to be explained away. The words landed softly, but they hit hard. What do you mean? She met my eyes then, and I saw something unguarded in her face. Something tired. Something hopeful enough to hurt. My family thinks I'm alone because nobody picked me, she said. Brent thinks I'll come crawling back if I get lonely enough. Half our friends think we're either secretly together or emotionally defective. She gave a small shrug. And you... I waited. Her voice dropped. You always make me feel chosen, even when you pretend you're not choosing me. I forgot how to breathe. The waitress came by again, cheerful and unaware. Can I get anything else for the happy couple? Maren didn't look away from me. I answered without looking away from her either. Just the check. Kelsey set it down with a grin. Take your time, Mr. and Mrs. Maren picked up the receipt before I could, and that was when both of us saw what Kelsey had written across the top in blue pen. Happy anniversary, lovebirds. And under that, with a little heart, your wife looks at you like you hung the moon. Maren went still. Then her phone lit up beside her plate. Her mother's name filled the screen, followed by a text preview that made Maren's face go pale. Please tell me you are not bringing Nolan again unless he is finally more than your sad little backup plan. Maren's phone kept glowing between us like a flare. Please tell me you are not bringing Nolan again unless he is finally more than your sad little backup plan. I read it twice, each time feeling something hot and ugly move behind my ribs. Maren reached for the phone, but her hand wasn't steady. I covered it with mine before I thought better of it. Her fingers went still beneath my palm, not pulled away, not laughed off, not hidden. Still. Maren, I said quietly. She kept staring at the screen. Don't. I wasn't going to say anything. You have that face? What face? The one where you're about to be noble and calm and quietly furious. Her mouth twisted. It's very attractive and very inconvenient. That knocked a laugh out of me before I could stop it. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for 1 second, the hurt in them loosened. I'm sorry, she said. You didn't write it. No, but I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I slid the phone face down with my free hand. I showed up. I always show up for you. The words hung between us, larger than I'd meant them to be. Maren looked down at our hands. My thumb had ended up resting lightly against her knuckle. A tiny point of contact. Ridiculous, considering we'd shared blankets, borrowed sweatshirts, eaten from the same takeout containers, and once spent an entire night in an airport sleeping shoulder to shoulder. But this felt different because neither of us was pretending it was nothing. "You do," she whispered. I should have let go. I didn't. Kelsey dropped off the card reader and tried valiantly not to look at our joined hands. No rush. I paid without releasing Maren. When we stepped outside, rain had softened into mist. The sidewalks shone and cars hissed along the street. Maren stood under the diner awning, clutching her little black purse, my denim jacket hanging loose on her shoulders. She looked like a woman about to go to war in borrowed armor. "Okay," she said, too brightly. "New plan. We go to brunch. You are my husband now, apparently." We smile, eat tiny quiches, and avoid questions about rings, taxes, and why my mother wasn't invited to the wedding. Maren. What? I'm not going in there as a punchline. Her lips parted. I took a breath. If I'm your husband today, I'm not going to be the sad backup plan. I'm not going to stand beside you while people act like choosing me would be settling. Her eyes softened. Nolan. And I'm not going to act like choosing you is charity. My voice dropped. It would be the easiest thing I've ever done. The mist collected in her hair. One auburn strand stuck to her cheek, and I had the absurd urge to tuck it back just to see if she'd let me. She did it herself, maybe because she knew me too well. Don't say things like that unless you mean them, she said. I mean them. Her breath caught. For years, I'd imagined confessing in perfect conditions, maybe on a bridge at sunset, maybe after too much wine, maybe never, which had been the leading plan. Instead, I was on a wet sidewalk outside Daisy's diner with a receipt in my pocket that called her my wife. Maren stepped closer. How much? What? How much do you mean it? Her voice shook a little, but her chin lifted like she was daring me not to answer. My heart was hammering. Enough that when Kelsey asked if this was a first date, I wanted to say no because that sounded too small. Maren stared at me. I kept going because apparently once a man detonated his life before noon, there was no reason to be subtle. Enough that when I called you my wife, part of me thought, finally. Her eyes glistened. Not crying, not yet. But close enough to make me ache. Nolan, she whispered, and my name in her mouth sounded like a door opening. I took one step toward her, slowly, giving her every chance to move away. She didn't. The awning dripped beside us. Someone passed with a grocery bag and an umbrella. The whole city kept going, rude and unaware, while Maren lifted her face to mine. Are we doing this for brunch? She asked softly. Or are we doing this because we're cowards who needed a waitress to force our hand? I smiled despite the thunder in my chest. Probably both. That made her laugh, wet and breathless. Then she reached up, hooked 2 fingers in the front of my jacket, and pulled me down. Her kiss was not careful. It was warm and startled and a little angry, like she was mad at both of us for taking so long. I froze for half a second from sheer disbelief, and then my hand found her waist and hers slid up to the back of my neck. Maren made the smallest sound against my mouth. That was it. That was the end of me. I kissed her like I'd been saving up 7 years of restraint and had finally received permission to spend it all at once. She tasted like tea and lemon, and she fit against me with a familiarity that was almost worse than novelty, like my body had known all along and was relieved my brain had caught up. When we broke apart, we stayed close. Too close for friendship. Not close enough for me. Her eyes searched mine. That was educational, I said. She laughed and pressed her forehead to my chest. Idiot. You're idiot? She went still. I felt it. The question inside the joke. Then her arms slid around my waist under my open coat. Maybe. Maybe it was not yes, but it was not no. And from Maren, who had built entire fences out of sarcasm and survival, maybe sounded like a miracle. We drove to her aunt's house in my truck because Maren claimed she couldn't be trusted behind the wheel while emotionally concussed by kissing. She spent most of the ride twisting the hem of her dress. At a red light, I took her hand. She looked at our fingers, then at me. You're very committed to the role. This isn't the role. Her thumb brushed mine once. Good. The brunch was in Lake Oswego, in a house with white columns and windows big enough to judge you through. Cars lined the curved driveway. Through the glass front door, I could see people holding champagne flutes and wearing pastel colors with strategic smiles. Maren exhaled slowly. Hey, I turned off the engine. Look at me. She did. We don't have to go in. Yes, we do. No, I said. We really don't. I'll take you anywhere. Coast, bookstore. That weird waffle truck you pretend not to love. I do not pretend. You once called it a structural triumph of sugar. It is. I smiled, but she didn't. So I squeezed her hand. Maren, I meant what I said. I choose you. Not as a shield. Not because they're cruel, because it's you. Her face changed again, the way it had in the diner. Like something inside her was bracing and reaching at the same time. She leaned across the console and kissed me once, softer than before. Just a press of lips. A promise with trembling edges. Then she whispered, Then come choose me loudly. Inside, her mother spotted us before we made it 3 steps past the foyer. Celeste Cole was elegant in a cream pantsuit, with Maren's eyes and none of her warmth. Her gaze dropped to our joined hands, then lifted to my face. Nolan, she said. How nice. Maren didn't mention she was bringing you. Maren's hand tightened around mine. I waited for her to introduce me as her friend, her buffer, her raccoon. Instead, she moved closer until her shoulder brushed my arm. Mom, she said, voice clear, this is my husband. The room went silent, and this time I was the one who whispered, Don't you dare take it back. Celeste Cole blinked once, only once. That was her gift, I'd learned over the years. Other people reacted. Celeste recalculated. Your husband, she repeated. Maren's hand was still in mine, warm and damp and gripping like she'd either found courage or stolen mine. Yes, Maren said. A woman near the fireplace made a tiny choking sound into her mimosa. Somebody else whispered, Married? I stood beside Maren and felt the entire room aim itself at us. This was the part where I should have been terrified. Instead, all I could think about was the fact that Maren had said it. Not my fake husband. Not sort of. Not for today. This is my husband. And even if the words were built on a lie, the way she leaned into me was not. Celeste's smile appeared slowly. How unexpected. Maren's fingers twitched in mine. I lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. The room went quieter. Maren looked up at me, and for 1 second the brunch disappeared. Her eyes warmed, surprised and bright, and the corner of her mouth curved like she was trying very hard not to smile. Very unexpected, I said, looking only at her. Best thing that ever happened to me. Her breath caught. There. That was true. Celeste cleared her throat. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. Thank you, Maren said. Her mother's gaze sharpened. When did this happen? 3 years ago, Maren said, because apparently we were committing fully to diner canon. 3 years. Celeste's voice stayed smooth, but her eyes could have sliced bread. And you didn't tell your family? Maren opened her mouth. I felt her panic before I saw it. The small intake of breath, the tension in her shoulder against my arm. So I squeezed her hand, not to rescue her, but to remind her she wasn't standing alone. She glanced at me. Her expression changed. No, she said, stronger now. I didn't. Aunt Patrice, whose house it was, drifted closer with the delighted horror of a woman witnessing prime family theater. But why, sweetheart? Maren smiled, and it was not her polite smile. It was the one she used when a client asked if she could just make the logo bigger. Because I wanted something that was mine. I felt that sentence land in the room. It landed in me, too. Celeste's smile thinned. Marriage is not usually a secret hobby, Maren. No, Maren said. It's usually a partnership. Then she looked at me. Not for approval, for partnership. I could have kissed her right there in front of the fruit platter and God. Instead, I leaned closer and murmured, "You're terrifying when you're magnificent." Her mouth twitched. "You're flirting in combat, trying to keep morale up." She laughed. It was small, but it was real. And it did exactly what her laugh always did, pulled all the oxygen toward her. Her cousin Priya rushed over then, breaking the tension with a squeal. "You got married? To Nolan? I knew it. I told Arun you two had secret married energy." "Apparently that's going around," I said. Priya hugged Maren, then hugged me, then whispered loudly, "If this is a bit, I respect it, but you both look hot and in love, so carry on." Maren turned scarlet. I decided Priya was my favorite relative. The next hour was a trial by tiny quiche. People asked how I proposed. Maren said, "Badly, but with conviction." They asked where we honeymooned. I said, "A cabin on the coast because 3 years ago Maren and I had actually rented one during a storm after her apartment flooded. We'd played cards by candlelight and fallen asleep on opposite ends of the same couch, my foot tucked under her calf, neither of us moving until morning." Maren heard my answer and went quiet. When the questions drifted away, she pulled me into a hallway lined with family photos and shut us behind a half-closed door to the laundry room. "Coast cabin?" she whispered. "You said we needed a backstory. You remembered that weekend?" I stared at her. "Maren, I remember what sweater you wore." Her lips parted. "The blue one," I said. "Sleeves too long. You kept making tea even though the power was out and the kettle was useless." Her eyes softened. "You chopped firewood like a man trying to impress a pioneer widow." "I was trying to impress you." The words escaped before I could sand the edges off them. Maren went very still. The dryer hummed behind us. Somewhere down the hall, her family laughed too loudly at something that wasn't funny. "You were?" she asked. "Constantly." She looked down, then back at me. "I thought you were just being you." "I was. Unfortunately, me has been in love with you for a long time." There it was, not implied, not dressed as a joke, not hidden behind waitress mistakes or family strategy. Maren's eyes shone. "You can't just say that in my aunt's laundry room," she whispered. "I can take it back and say it by the cheese board." "Nolan, I won't take it back." Her expression trembled between laughter and tears, then she stepped into me. Her hands rose to my chest first, tentative, feeling the truth of me through my shirt. I held still because this felt like something she needed to choose. Then her fingers curled in the fabric and she lifted her face. This kiss was different. The first had been a spark in the rain. This one was a question answered slowly. Her mouth met mine soft and searching. I slid one hand to the small of her back, and she sighed against me like some guarded part of her had finally set down its bags. Her body fit against mine in the narrow space between washer and wall, and I had the dizzy thought that if someone opened the door, I would still not move first. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against my chin. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Lie about being married? Be wanted without waiting for it to vanish." That broke me more than the text had. I cupped her face. "I'm not vanishing." "You don't know that." "I know me." She searched my face like she was looking for the seam in my certainty. "And I know you." I said, "You'll get scared and make jokes. I'll get scared and act useful. We'll probably ruin at least one dinner and 3 perfectly good conversations. But I'm not leaving just because it's complicated." Her lips curved faintly. "That was weirdly romantic." "I can do better. There may be laundry detergent affecting the acoustics." She laughed, then kissed me again, quick, grateful, hers. When we returned to the living room, her mother was waiting. Beside her stood Brent. Of course he was there. Cream sweater, expensive watch. Expression like he had ordered confidence online and paid for rush shipping. "Maren," he said, smiling as if I didn't exist. "Your mother thought you might want to see a familiar face." Maren's hand found mine immediately. I threaded our fingers together. But before I could say a word, Maren stepped half in front of me, not hiding behind me, choosing her own ground. "Brent," she said evenly, "this is Nolan." His gaze dipped to our joined hands. "Yes," he said. "I remember your friend." Maren lifted her chin. My husband, she corrected. Brent laughed. Not loudly, just enough to insult us both. Come on, Maren. His smile sharpened. You don't have to keep performing. We both know what this is. The old Maren might have snapped. This Maren looked at me first, not asking me to save her, asking if I was still there. I brought her hand to my heart. She felt the answer under her palm. Then she turned back to Brent and smiled. You're right, she said. We should stop performing. And before anyone could speak, she rose onto her toes and kissed me in front of everyone. Maren kissed me like she had something to prove, then forgot the proof and kept the kiss for herself. That was the only way I could explain it. At first, her mouth pressed to mine with theatrical certainty. A public answer. A beautiful, reckless correction in front of her mother, her ex, and a room full of relatives pretending not to stare. Then her fingers slid into my hair, the room disappeared. Her lips softened. Her breath caught against mine. My hand found her waist and I pulled her in by instinct, not enough to make a scene. Though, frankly, the scene had already filed paperwork and moved in, but enough that she knew I wasn't just receiving the kiss. I was choosing it. Choosing her. When she drew back, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were dazed in a way that made my grip tighten gently at her waist. Someone dropped a fork. Priya whispered, "Oh, they are definitely married." Brent's expression had curdled. Celeste looked like she'd bitten into a lemon and planned to blame the lemon. Maren stayed close to me. There, she said, her voice slightly breathless. No performance. Brent gave a short laugh. That's convincing, really. Very passionate. You always did review affection like a restaurant, Maren said. I nearly choked. Her eyes flicked to mine, wicked and alive. There she was. My Maren. Except not mine in the old, silent, aching way. Mine because she had just reached for me with both hands in front of everyone who had ever made her feel hard to love. Brent stepped closer. Can we talk privately? No, Maren said. He blinked. No, he repeated, like the word was in a language he'd never bothered learning. She shook her head. No, I don't owe you privacy. I don't owe you closure. And I definitely don't owe you a chance to explain why I'm confused. Celeste's voice cut in. Maren, don't be dramatic. Maren flinched. It was tiny. Most people wouldn't have caught it. I did. But before I could speak, she squeezed my hand once. Her signal. Let me. Then she turned to her mother. I'm not being dramatic, she said. I'm being clear. There's a difference, though I understand why it's unfamiliar. Aunt Patrice made a noise that might have been a cough or applause. Celeste's mouth tightened. I only wanted what was best for you. No, Maren said softly. You wanted what looked best. The sentence changed the air. Maren's shoulders rose, then fell. She glanced at me and I gave her the smallest nod. Not permission. Faith. She continued. Nolan has been my best friend for 7 years. He knows how I take my coffee, which songs make me cry, and exactly how long to let me rant before handing me snacks. He has seen me broke, sick, furious, scared, ambitious, petty, and wearing a face mask that made me look like a swamp ghost. You were a very elegant swamp ghost, I murmured. Her lips twitched. Then she looked back at her mother. He has never once made me feel like I was too much. My chest went tight. Maren's voice wavered, but she didn't stop. If that makes him my backup plan to you, then you don't understand love nearly as well as you think you do. Silence. Brent looked annoyed. Celeste looked stunned. I looked at Maren like Kelsey's receipt had been an understatement. She looked at me then, and the courage in her face trembled. So I lifted her hand and kissed her palm, a private gesture in a public room. Her eyes filled. Brent muttered something under his breath and walked toward the patio doors. Celeste followed him with her gaze, then looked away first. For once, nobody chased him. Maren let out a shaky laugh. I think I just ruined cousin brunch. Priya appeared at her side with 2 champagne flutes. Please, you saved it? The quiches were dry and Uncle John was about to discuss cryptocurrency. Maren accepted a glass. In that case, I'm a hero. My hero, I said. She tilted her head. Careful, that sounded husbandly. I'm trying it on. And? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Dangerously comfortable. Her smile faded into something warmer. For the next 20 minutes, we stayed. Not because we had to, but because Maren wanted to leave on her own terms. She talked to Priya. She hugged her aunt. She even accepted a stiff congratulations from Celeste, though her jaw tightened afterward. When we finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The world smelled clean, wet leaves, cold pavement, early spring. Maren made it halfway down the driveway before she turned to me and said, I need air. We are outside. Different air. So we walked. The neighborhood was quiet, all manicured lawns and dripping trees. She didn't let go of my hand. Every few steps, her thumb moved over mine like she was checking whether I was still real. Finally, she stopped beneath a maple tree. I have to tell you something, she said. My heart kicked once. Okay. She stared at our joined hands. When you called me your wife at the diner, I didn't want it because of my mother. I waited. I mean, yes, part of me wanted to borrow the word. Just for a morning. Just to feel like someone had picked me so completely nobody could argue with it. She swallowed. But mostly I wanted it because it was you saying it. The sidewalk blurred a little around the edges. Maren laughed nervously. Please say something before I climb into that hedge and start a new life. I stepped close and cupped her face with both hands. I love you. She closed her eyes. I love you, I said again, because the first time felt too small for 7 years. Not as my friend with confusing benefits. Not as my fake wife. Not because somebody else failed to see you properly. I love you because you're brilliant and ridiculous and brave. Because you steal my food and fix my terrible fonts. Because you make every room feel like the one place I wanted to be. A tear slipped down her cheek. I caught it with my thumb. I love you, she whispered. The words hit me so hard I forgot the sidewalk, the brunch, the lie, the years. She laughed through another tear. I have for a while, longer than is convenient. I kept waiting for it to go away. Did it? No. Her hands closed around my wrists. It got worse every time you remembered something small. I smiled helplessly. I remember everything. I know. She leaned into my touch. That was the problem. I kissed her beneath the maple tree. No audience. No strategy. No borrowed title. Just Maren lifting onto her toes, her hands sliding under my coat, her mouth opening softly under mine like she was done being careful. I held her like a vow I wasn't allowed to make yet, and she kissed me like maybe vows didn't start at an altar. Maybe they started with knowing. When we broke apart, she rested her forehead against mine. So, what are we doing? Dating, I said. Her eyebrows rose. Very traditional after telling 30 people we're married. We can be bold in reverse, she laughed. Dating, as in you ask me out? Yes. Properly? With alarming sincerity. Good. She brushed her nose against mine. Do it. Maren Cole, will you go on a date with me tonight? She pretended to think. I don't know. My husband might object. I'll fight him. He's tall. I'll negotiate. She grinned, then kissed the corner of my mouth. Yes, Nolan Reed. I'll go on a date with you. We stood there smiling like idiots until her phone buzzed. She checked it, and her expression shifted. Not fear this time, but something wary. What? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. A message from Celeste. If this marriage is real, come to Sunday dinner tomorrow, both of you. No more secrets. Maren looked up at me. Then, to my surprise, she smiled. Well, she said, slipping her hand back into mine, our first date better be good. Apparently we're meeting the in-laws. Our first date started with waffles from a food truck because Maren insisted romance was best measured in powdered sugar. This is not what I pictured for us, I said, standing beside her under a striped awning while she balanced a paper tray like it contained diamonds. She looked up at me. You pictured us? I should have learned by then that honesty, once invited in, had a way of taking over the room. All the time, I said. Her teasing smile softened. Rain tapped lightly on the awning. Her shoulder brushed mine. Neither of us moved away. "What did you picture?" she asked. I wiped a dot of whipped cream from the corner of her mouth with my thumb, then realized what I'd done. Maren went still. So did I. Then she caught my wrist and kissed my thumb. My entire body forgot how sidewalks worked. "I pictured," I said carefully, "less chance of syrup on my shoes." She laughed, but her fingers stayed around my wrist. "Coward?" "Yes." "Try again." So I did. "I pictured walking with you without pretending I wasn't trying to match my pace to yours. I pictured kissing you in places I already loved, so they'd belong to us after. I pictured waking up and calling you first, then realizing you were already there." Her eyes shone in the food truck lights. "That one," she whispered. "Keep that one." I leaned down and kissed her, slow and sweet, with waffle steam curling around us and powdered sugar on her fingertips. It was not dramatic. Nobody gasped. No one dropped a fork. It was better. It felt like the beginning we'd been late to. The next evening, we went to Celeste's. Maren wore black jeans, boots, and the yellow sweater I knew she used as emotional armor. I wore a button-down she'd chosen because, in her words, if we're going to confess fraud, at least look trustworthy. "We are not confessing fraud," I said as we sat in my truck outside her mother's townhouse. "We told approximately 40 people we've been married for 3 years. Fine, light fraud." She laughed, then went quiet. I reached for her hand. "We can tell the truth and still not give them permission to shrink us." Maren looked at me. "You make things sound possible." "They are." "You're annoyingly good at being steady." "I've been practicing, mostly around you." She leaned across the console and kissed me once. "Then let's go disappoint my mother with integrity." Dinner was painfully polite for exactly 12 minutes. Celeste served roast chicken, asked about my job, complimented Maren's sweater, and did not mention marriage until dessert. Then she set down her fork and looked at us across the table. "I checked county records," she said. Maren's hand tightened under the table. I held it. Celeste continued, "There is no marriage license." Silence spread across the dining room. Maren took a breath. I felt her fear, but I also felt something stronger. Her fingers threaded through mine, not hiding. "No," she said, "there isn't." Celeste's face hardened with disappointment. "And before you say anything," Maren continued, "I know lying wasn't mature. I know it embarrassed you. But you should know why I let it happen." Her mother sat back. Maren's voice shook once, then steadied. "Because when Nolan said I was his wife, it was the first time in a long time I didn't feel like someone's warning story. Or someone's problem to fix. I felt chosen." I turned toward her. She looked at me then, and everything else blurred. "And then," she said softly, "I realized I didn't want the lie. I wanted him." Celeste's expression shifted. Not softened exactly, but something cracked. I cleared my throat. "I love your daughter. I should have said that years ago. I won't pretend we handled this perfectly, but I'm not pretending about her." Celeste looked between us. "So what are you now?" Maren glanced at me. I smiled. She smiled back. "Dating," she said. Celeste closed her eyes briefly. "Dating." "With alarming sincerity," Maren added. A laugh escaped me. For one shocking second, Celeste almost smiled. "Then date," she said quietly. Honestly this time. Maren's lips parted. Her mother looked down at her plate. "And perhaps I owe you an apology." The words were stiff, imperfect. But Maren heard them. I saw it in the way her eyes filled. "Yes," Maren said. "You do." Celeste nodded once. "Then I'm sorry." It didn't fix everything. Real apologies rarely do in one sitting. But Maren's shoulders lowered, and beneath the table her thumb brushed over mine. After dinner, we stood on Celeste's front steps under a sky clearing to stars. Maren looked stunned. Did my mother just approve of dating? I think so. Should we be worried? Deeply. She laughed and stepped into my arms. I wrapped my coat around both of us, and she tucked her cold nose against my neck. "We told the truth," she murmured. We did. And you're still here. I told you I would be. She lifted her head. Say it again. I love you. Her smile trembled. Again? I love you, Maren Cole. She kissed me like every version of herself was finally starting to believe it. 6 months later, Daisy's diner had fixed the crack in the red booth, but Kelsey still worked Saturday mornings and still wrote things on receipts she had no business writing. Maren and I sat in our corner, sharing hash browns by mutual agreement now, though she continued to steal mine on principle. Kelsey came by with coffee and grinned. My favorite married couple. Still not married, I said. Maren lifted her hand. Yet. I nearly spilled my coffee. She looked at me over the rim of her mug, eyes bright with mischief, and something deeper. What? You thought I didn't know you've been researching rings on your laptop? I stared at her. You used my Wi-Fi, she said. Kelsey gasped. There's going to be a proposal? There was going to be, I muttered. Maren leaned her chin on her hand. Don't worry, I'll act surprised. I reached into my jacket pocket. Her smile vanished. Nolan, she whispered. I had a plan, I said. It involved the coast, a sunset, and considerably less diner grease. But then you were sitting here wearing my jacket again, stealing my potatoes again, looking at me like what? Like Kelsey was right the first time. Her eyes filled. I slid out of the booth and knelt beside the cracked red vinyl where everything had begun with the wrong word that somehow led us to the truth. Maren, I called you my wife before I earned the right. So I'm asking now. I opened the ring box. Would you marry me for real? She covered her mouth. Kelsey started crying immediately. Maren nodded before she could speak, then laughed through tears. Yes, obviously yes, you ridiculous man. I stood, and she threw herself into my arms. The whole diner clapped. Kelsey wrote happy anniversary, lovebirds on the receipt again, even though we told her it was not our anniversary. By the following spring, Maren walked toward me in a small garden behind a bookstore, wearing a simple white dress and my mother's pearl earrings. Celeste cried in the front row. Priya cried louder. Kelsey, somehow invited, handed out tissues and claimed she had manifested the entire thing. When Maren reached me, she took my hands and whispered, Don't you dare take it back. I smiled so hard it hurt. Never. And when I finally called her my wife again, it wasn't a lie or a shield or a dare in a diner. It was Maren in sunlight, laughing through tears, her hand in mine choosing me back. What would you have done if you accidentally introduced your best friend as your wife? And she whispered, Don't you dare take it back? Have you ever had one unexpected moment change a friendship into something more? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.